Start by welcoming you to Mission Citizen. My name is Calla Rhodes, and I will be your teacher for these online versions of our classes. So I'm going to start by giving you a little explanation of what Mission Citizen is. Mission Citizen was founded 10 years ago with the goal of helping future U.S. citizens pass the naturalization exam, so the citizenship exam, and become effective citizens. It's a 10-week program, and each week covers some of the 100 questions on the civics test portion of the naturalization interview. We also provide some amount of practice for the English test, although we don't teach English. We just provide some practice with the structure of the English test. And if you attend all 10 of our classes in person and pass a practice test, you are eligible to receive a $275 scholarship to help pay the cost of naturalization. And of course, we understand that some people will not be able to make it 10 weeks in a row. If you're watching this video, it's probably because you weren't able to make the first week of classes. So what we do with that is you can make those up if you are still interested in receiving a scholarship. So just go ahead and talk to your class leader for more information on still receiving the scholarship, even if you don't make all 10 classes. Okay. So I'm going to get into our class structure. So weeks 1 through 8 cover the civics material from the list of 100 civics questions that may appear on the civics test. And then on week 9, we go over what to expect during the naturalization interview and practice the English test. And then on week 10, if you attend our in-person class, an immigration lawyer comes in and answers any questions you may have on your application or just the process in general. And you also do a mock naturalization interview. Okay, so we're going to get into what exactly classes look like now. So slides that have this gray kind of bar on the top are slides with new information. So you're going to want to take notes on the information in bold. If you are listening to this video right now, you're going to want to make sure that you go to our website, go to the student resources tabs and find lesson number 1 and print out the note sheet that you have under that lesson, and that will be where you can go ahead and take notes on the info in bold in the blanks on your note sheet. So the new information will include big picture ideas, background, details to help clarify concepts, and history, and all of that should help you remember the information you need to know for the civics test. Okay, and then our red slides are quiz slides. So if it has this red bar on the top, that means that, we're going to be showing an official naturalization exam question and the acceptable answers to the question. So these red slides will all have the questions exactly as they are written by the U.S. Customs and Immigration Services, or USCIS, which is the government agency that administers immigration interviews. So these are all questions that you can expect to see during the interview and answers that will work if you give them during your interview. Okay, so we are in our first week. This is lesson 1, in which we talk about Colonial America and the Constitutional Convention. So we're just going to go ahead and get into it. So first off, Colonial America. In the 1600s, European settlers came to North America for many different reasons, including freedom, political liberty, religious freedom, economic opportunity, to practice their religion, or to escape persecution. So if you want to just go ahead and write any one of those bolded answers in the first blank on your note sheet. Give you a minute to do that. Okay, now that you have that answer written down, we're going to go ahead and move on. So the 13 original colonies, that's going to be these what are now US states in red here on the map to my right. And the colonists settled on the east coast of the United States in those red colonies. And over time, 13 colonies formed. Each of them had a diverse group of people, ideas, and religions. So they were all pretty culturally different. But they were all owned by Great Britain, and they would eventually become the first 13 states of the US, and later the US expanded to include all of these other states in the gray. Okay, so you're going to need to know any 3 of the 13 original colonies. You can choose any of these we have on the map here. I have a recommendation if you want help remembering 3. A really easy combination would be to do the news, so New Hampshire, New York, and New Jersey, if that helps you remember. Or you can do North and South Carolina and one other. But any 3 you can remember will be great. So just make sure you write down 3 of those original colonies onto your note sheet. Okay, now that you've done that, we're going to move on to talking about early relations with Native Americans. So Native Americans, and you might also heard them referred to as Indians, American Indians, or indigenous people. So Native Americans lived in America long before European colonists arrived, and they continue to live here today. So in the times of early colonialism, Native Americans helped settlers survive by teaching them how to farm, fish, and hunt in America, because the settlers were not used to this new land and kind of the plants and animals that were here and needed help kind of feeding themselves and surviving in this new land. However, relations between settlers and Native Americans became tense when settlers tried to expand their territory, often using violence against Native American tribes. And settlers also brought with them diseases that killed large numbers of native populations, because people were used to those diseases in Europe and had built up immunity to them, but the native populations had never encountered these diseases, and so their bodies were not able to fight them off, and many, many native people died due to those diseases brought over by the colonists. Okay, so soon after the colonists arrived, Africans were taken from Africa and brought to America as slaves. The first African slaves were brought to Virginia in 1619, and slavery continued for nearly 200 more years after that. Slavery was a brutal, violent system in which white Americans treated Black people as property, so they used Black people for their labor, and that labor was both forced and unpaid for the profit of white Americans. So as many as 6 to 7 million Africans were stolen from their homeland and brought to the Americas as slaves in the 1700s alone. So slavery in the colonies was a huge system that impacted many, many lives, and was a really crucial part of our early country. So in the 17th and 18th centuries, enslaved Africans worked in every American colony. It's a bit of a myth that slavery only existed in the South. It's true that slavery was never as widespread in the northern colonies as the southern ones, but it did still exist in northern colonies as well. So as I said before, most slaves worked in southern colonies, and they grew cash crops like tobacco, rice, and indigo, generally on either a large plantation or smaller farms. And though most slaves were living in the South, many northern businessmen grew rich off the slave trade and off of investing in southern plantations. So it was really crucial to the economy of the entire country and helped a lot of white Americans become rich at the expense of African slaves. Okay, so now we're going to get into talking about the American Revolution. So the colonists were angry with the British for denying them the freedom to govern themselves. This might sound a bit ironic given what we've just learned on the last slide about the colonists enslaving Africans, but they failed to notice the irony. So American colonies decided to go to war with Britain for freedom, and their main reasons for that were high taxes, or also known as taxation without representation. So they were being taxed at high rates without having any sort of say in British government to impact, what those taxes were being spent on. Additionally, American colonists were angry because the British Army was staying in their houses in something that was known as quartering, basically with no warning, and the colonists had no ability to say, no, you can't stay in my house. So it was just a big invasion of privacy and the individual rights of American colonists. And also, the main reason is really just that they didn't have self-government. American colonists no longer wanted to be ruled by an overseas power that didn't know about local issues and, wasn't in touch with the day-to-day lives of American colonists. And obviously, this was a time long before internet or that level of connection between countries. So it really was seen as an injustice among people in the American colonies that they were being ruled by a big, faraway country that was not actually dealing with the ramifications of the laws and policies that were enacted in the American colonies. Okay, so all of these frustrations with the British government eventually led to the Declaration of Independence. So the Declaration of Independence was written by Thomas Jefferson and was adopted on July 4th, 1776, and it declared that the U.S. would become independent from Britain. It also stated that Americans have, and all people, have basic rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So these are rights that cannot be taken away by any government or any person at any time, and we have them just by being alive. Okay, this is a lot of information, so make sure you get all this down. Everything in the bold. Okay, now we're going to move on to the American Revolution. So colonists fought against the British from 1775 to 1781 in what's called the American Revolutionary War. So it began in 1775 with the Battle of Lexington and ended just 6 years later with the Battle of Yorktown. And it ended with the American colonists winning the war and gaining independence from Britain. And this was a bit of a surprising victory because the British Empire was an established, very powerful nation. And, the American colonists were kind of the underdogs of this situation, but for various reasons based on kind of Americans' passion for revolution and the unity among Americans that they believed that they should have independence from Britain, eventually culminated in victory for the American colonists. Okay, so now here's what we do during our in-person classes is we do a little quiz after each chunk of new information that we learn. So I kind of will read off a question, and then if you were in class, you would just shout out the answer if you could remember it. So maybe while you're wherever you are, just writing this information down on your own. Just try to think of the answer or say it out loud if you want when I ask the question. And try to do this without looking at your notes if possible. So just try to do it based off memory. So my first question is, what is one reason colonists came to America? Okay, now that you've had a second to think of it, to shout it out, here is our answer, or our answers freedom, political liberty, religious freedom, economic opportunity to practice their religion, or to escape persecution. Any of these answers work and you only need one. I would recommend remembering freedom. It's probably the simplest, and a lot of these other answers basically just come down to meaning freedom. Okay, question number 2. There were 13 original states. Name 3 of them. Okay, so your answer could have been any of these: New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, or Georgia. Any of those 13. You just need 3 of them. Okay, who lived in America before the Europeans arrived? The answer is Native Americans or American Indians, and you can also say Indigenous Americans or Indigenous people. That would work too. And for any of these answers, if you say something that has the same meaning as the official answer, but is kind of different wording, that is always fine as long as the meaning truly is the same. So rewording these answers will still be correct. Okay, what group of people was taken to America and sold as slaves? The answer is Africans or people from Africa. Next question, why did the colonists fight the British? You can say because of high taxes or taxation without representation, because the British Army stayed in their houses, which you can call boarding or quartering, or you can say because they didn't have self-government. Any one of these 3 explanations will be good. Okay, who wrote the Declaration of Independence? If you said Thomas Jefferson, you are correct. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, when was the Declaration of Independence adopted? It was July 4th, 1776. You'll notice July 4th is the day we celebrate Independence Day every single year. So you're just going to have to remember that, 1776. What did the Declaration of Independence do? It announced or declared our independence from Great Britain. Declared our independence from Great Britain, said that the United States is free from Great Britain, all different ways of saying the same thing. That's a pretty easy one. As long as you just think about the words Declaration of Independence, you've got your answer right there. Declared independence. Okay. What are 2 rights in the Declaration of Independence? If you said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, any 2 of those, then you would be correct. And you might have heard the phrase life, liberty, and property instead of the pursuit of happiness before. That's the phrase that shows up in the Constitution, but not the Declaration of Independence. So if you get those confused at all, if you switch the pursuit of happiness out for property, then I would just recommend memorizing the first 2 rights, so life and liberty, to keep yourself from mixing that one up. Okay, so we've gone through all of the quiz questions on that section of the learning, but now we still have some more to learn about uniting the states. So the Articles of Confederation were created after Americans gained independence from Britain to set up the new government in America. So what the Articles of Confederation did was they created a weak national government and gave the states all of the power, or pretty much all of the power. And the reason behind this is that the American colonists were very worried about a powerful national government like the British, kind of playing a really big role in the average person's lives and exerting a lot of power over citizens. So they decided that states should get the vast majority of power because they would be less likely to be corrupt and kind of tyrannical in the same ways that the British government were. So the Articles of Confederation were in place for only 8 years, from 1781 to 1789. And the reason behind it was that there were some pretty big problems with the Articles of Confederation. So because they didn't give the federal government very much power at all, they made it actually really hard for the states to kind of govern in a unified country. Like, states were able to print their own currencies and do things like that kind of interrupted the unity of the nation as a whole, and just really made it difficult for the American government to function properly. So because the states realized that these problems were kind of making it difficult to govern under the Articles of Confederation, they arranged for a constitutional convention to revise them and basically just to edit them. They had no plans of creating a whole new system of government. They just wanted to improve the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. So the convention was held from May to September of 1787 in Philadelphia, and 55 delegates from all of the 13 states attended in order to brainstorm solutions to the issues with the Articles of Confederation. After a lot of deliberation and debate, the Founding Fathers ultimately decided to just scrap the Articles of Confederation entirely and write the Constitution at the Constitutional Convention in 1787. So they decided that the Articles of Confederation were so flawed that they needed an entirely new document outlining an entirely new system of government. So for the Constitution to be adopted, it needed to be ratified or agreed to by the American people. So in order to do that, a series of essays called the Federalist Papers were published in newspapers across the US, and the goal was to convince Americans to ratify the Constitution. The Federalist Papers were written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, who went by the alias Publius, or the pseudonym Publius, because they didn't want their real names to come out. So you just need any one of those names. You can just do Publius if you want to include all of them. If any of these sound familiar to you, maybe you've heard about the musical Hamilton, so you would find Alexander Hamilton an easy name to remember. Just make sure you get one of those down. Okay, so George Washington was Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. He was a really key figure during his lifetime in American history. He was the chair at the Constitutional Convention, so he was kind of running the show. And then he was pretty universally supported by Americans. I know it doesn't happen with presidents often. So after the Revolutionary War, it was kind of just generally understood that George Washington should become the first president of the United States of America. And because of that, he is known as the father of our country. And that's him on the right over there. He's got that fun powder wig kind of hair situation going on. Okay, that's George Washington, and now here is Benjamin Franklin. A lot of people think that Benjamin Franklin was a US president. He was actually not, but there are a lot of other interesting facts about him, and he was a very important figure in early American history. So Benjamin Franklin was a diplomat to France and England during the American Revolution. He's also the oldest man at the Constitutional Convention. He wrote Poor Richard's Almanac. He founded America's first free libraries, and he was the first postmaster general. So he was a pretty key figure in American government, and fun fact, he is also the inventor of electricity. But that will not be a acceptable answer on your naturalization test. Just any of these 5 will work. Okay, so now we're going to do another quiz to go over that information we just learned. So the first question is, what happened at the Constitutional Convention? The Constitution was written, or the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution. Both are good answers. When was the Constitution written? The answer to that is 1787. Okay, the Federalist Papers supported the passage of the U.S. Constitution. Try to name one of the writers. So you can do Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, James Madison, or Publius, their code name. And for these names, you can just do last names if that's all you can remember. So you can just say Hamilton, Jay, or Madison. But if you want to memorize the whole name, that might make it a bit easier. Okay, who was the first president? The answer is George Washington. Who is the father of our country? And this one is also George Washington. Okay, so now I believe, oh, we have one more. Okay, what is one thing Benjamin Franklin is famous for? And it can't be inventing electricity. If you said he was a U.S. diplomat, he was the oldest member of the Constitutional Convention, he was the first Postmaster General of the United States, he was the writer of Poor Richard's Almanac, or he started the first free libraries, any of those answers would be correct. Okay, so usually in class we will talk about a discussion question, but because we're not all together and you're just watching this on your own, we're going to go ahead and skip by that. And I would also, if we were in an in-person class, ask if you had any questions. But because I'm not here with you, if you have any questions, feel free to just go ahead and email missioncitizen@gmail.com and we can get back to you over email. Or if you want to call us, I don't know the phone number off the top of my head, but if you go to missioncitizen.org, you'll be able to find our phone number there. Well, thank you for listening to this first virtual lesson in our series of 10 lessons. And I hope that you got something out of it. I hope it was helpful in learning some information about early America and some information about the naturalization exam. And I hope that you will either attend lesson 2 in person or watch the video virtually to get the next round of information for your naturalization exam. Okay, well, thank you, everyone.